Free speech is a great thing. Most people watching this video will benefit from free speech. In the same breath, the downside to free speech is that some people have some really wacky opinions. After all, life would be boring if we all thought the same things. 9/11 was an inside job. The Great Pyramids were built by aliens. The Illuminati. The Earth is flat. Regardless of if you believe any of these or not, these would absolutely all be examples of conspiracy theories. The very definition of conspiracy theory is a belief that someone influential or controlling organisation or group is secretly responsible for a notable event or phenomenon. Now that we've set the scene, it's time to take a look at some Hypixel Skyblock conspiracy theories. I just want to make it clear that I don't necessarily think that these theories are true. However, they don't seem to be completely far-fetched and seem to be among the most popular ones. So, let's get started. Just before we do, if you are planning on purchasing anything from the Hypixel store, make sure to use code NITROS as it gets yourself 5% off. If you've not already, you should also subscribe to the channel. You should join the Discord server, it's linked in the description of this video. We offer slayers and dungeon carries, so if you need carries or want to carry make some coins, make sure to join. First up is insider trading, and people leaking updates before they even release on the alpha server. So I came across this forum post which is titled "The Hypixel Summoning Eye Market Crashed? Conspiracy." This was from February last year, which just about aligns with the Primal Dragon update going onto the alpha server. Just as an overview, recently the Skyblock Summoning Eye just collapsed. This is good for those who are farming, as the sell price increased roughly 500%. However, doing more research into this led me down a rabbit hole, and I think it should be explored more. The total supply for eyes dropped to exactly 7 eyes at its minimum. 7 eyes. The market has since partially stabilised, but the demand has shot back up to 80k, and the supply currently, as of writing this, is about 10k. Huge deficit going on. Many I have talked to, randoms in end lobbies, have voiced their confusion on the matter. I would like to investigate it further. Now off the bat, to me, it's just, without any extra context, it just sounds simply like the Primal Dragon update went onto alpha and everybody bought up Summoning Eyes because, well, they realised that they were going to go up and up in price because they were using craft recipes. Let's read on. Main theory. The biggest theory in my opinion, and the one that holds the most weight. There is some kind of data mining or insider trading ring within the Skyblock community. Data miners could use the Skyblock alpha server with a mole and then from there determine correctly that the price of Summoning Eyes would jump drastically after the update. This would turn out to be correct. The players would then go ahead to sell as soon as the price shot up. This is partially shown by the graph, when about 20 minutes after the crash, 10 minutes before the announcement, a third of the Summoning Eyes were all put up as high sell offers, and bought up at about 4 when the update was announced. I do not think this is a small group that would be operating and need to be some kind of large and malicious community of griefers, hackers and trolls who bought all of the eyes. It could also be some kind of admin interference. Admins who have prior knowledge of the update warn close friends and communities about the update leading to a mass buyout. This could have been done intentionally or unintentionally to leak in a possibly private Discord. This would not be a new thing for Skyblock. Admins have been known to perform insider trading regularly and have been caught and banned on several occasions. And I'll come back to that in just a moment. Conclusion. I normally wouldn't think much of this, but the price dipped to such a low number that I cannot ignore it. I feel like there's something bigger going on here. The supply drop so close to the update and the short sell back 20 minutes later. All signs point to some kind of bigger picture, and I hope to uncover it. This is the graph that was referenced with the quantities of offers and available Summoning Eyes on the market going to virtually nothing. And then by the looks of it, as soon as the announcement was made for the update and everybody realised that these Summoning Eyes were going to be suddenly so valuable if this update did drop, which it obviously didn't in the end, then people sold and made a ton of money. But obviously what's key to mention here is that it makes sense that lots of people would be buying these Summoning Eyes out because of what was included in that proposed update. You know, it makes sense that those Summoning Eyes went up so much. But the issue at hand was that people were buying up the Summoning Eyes before anybody should have even known about it. Now luckily today the Summoning Eyes have stabilised in price, and without any real clear plan for that Primal Dragon update, whether it's releasing or not, looking more unlikely and unlikely as time goes on, at least to me it doesn't seem implausible that something wasn't going on here. But I could be completely wrong. Now I mentioned I would come back to this sentence right here. Admins have been known to perform insider trading regularly and have been caught and banned on several occasions. See early Skyblock admins. Now, my game is really bugging out at the moment, and I'm not entirely sure why. All of the NPCs have gone invisible. I had texture issues, and my chat is completely messed up, and I can't seem to fix it. But that's besides the point, okay? There's usually NPCs here. And this room and these NPCs were introduced and reworked when the taming update was introduced. And this taming update that gave us extra levels and passive pet leveling was introduced around about December 2023, which, you know, just coincidentally was just a couple of months prior to the whole shenanigans leading to this conspiracy theory. Having to donate pets to George made some very useless and inexpensive pets become very expensive because they're in really high demand. Take, for example, the Jellyfish pet. For all intensive purposes, this has no business being 200 million coins. However, it's relatively limited in supply because you can only obtain the Jellyfish pet from the dark auction, and also it's useful to upgrade your taming level, and that's pretty much it. Of course, when you donate pets to George in, you know, return for those taming levels, those pets are voided, meaning that these Jellyfish pets are constantly being taken out of the market. But why is this significant to anything? Well, if we look at the sale history of Jellyfish pets, you can see, as most items do, or did, they started off very, very cheap and have worked their way up to be, you know, pretty expensive. Now, the most notable jump that you'll see here is right around here, which is just about the same time as we're kind of referencing, December 2023. And we can see that they were pretty comfortably selling for 20-30 million coins, and then all of a sudden they're now useful for the taming update, and they're up to 120 mil, and of course they'll rise even higher in the future. Now, there was an admin who actually went ahead and knew about this update. You know, they went ahead and bought Jellyfish pets prior to the update releasing, listed them for way higher, and then once the update actually came out on the alpha, they sold for the higher price, of course, because, well, they're now worth that much. People speculating that they're going to go up in value, and of course they do because they become useful. Now, I'm sure there's probably other insider trading that's gone on, but from my personal experience, that's the standout occasion. And that happened just a couple of months before the Summoning Knife fiasco. Now, I'm not saying that this was the same person, because it does seem like a bit of a larger scale operation, if anything did even happen, and if it wasn't just a simple anomaly. But the point I'm trying to make is insider trading has happened before in Skyblock, so there is a potential chance it could have happened then as well. Anyway, that's enough, let's move on. Next up, Ironman players have better RNG luck. I feel like this is an accusation, a thought that is thrown around so much, and it's usually by players who aren't Ironman. But is there actually anything to it? Well, of course, officially, Ironman players don't have better luck, but that's what makes this idea a conspiracy. A few months back, I made a video about one of my friends who plays on Ironman and has had ridiculous luck over his time playing Skyblock, over his Ironman profile. Well, for this I find myself on the best website ever to exist, and the question posed, is Ironman truly RNG carried? I see so many posts and people saying in game chat that Ironman has been RNG carried. Is it true that the RNG is buffed on Ironman profiles? And some people give pretty straightforward normal answers, and others quite the contrary. Freya's first drop from a zombie was a potato, so I guess that seals the deal. Kind of sums up why I don't go on Reddit. But if you just take a look through the forums, there's so many people boasting the insane Ironman RNG luck, and I think that is the whole point. On a regular profile, if me or you did some revs and you dropped a Warden Heart, great, perfect. If you just want to sell the Warden Heart, that's 100 mil, there you go. If you want a Warden Helmet, go ahead and craft one, perfect. If you do more revs and drop another one, you can just sell that one too. If you don't feel like grinding for a Warden Heart or a Warden Helmet, you can just simply buy one off the AH as well. Now, what does that mean, and what am I trying to get at? What I'm trying to say is that when you drop an RNG drop on an Ironman profile, it holds so much more weight. You're forced to put hours into grind for that particular drop. You can't get it any other way. The item that you want, that's usually good, that you need to craft with the drop, you can't get any other way other than dropping it yourself. And if you go ahead and drop a duplicate, it's almost like, what am I supposed to do with this? I feel like the bottom line is that more Ironman players are going to be more vocal about the drops than people on regular profiles because of this. Something else that you've got to consider is that majority of the time, the sort of person that plays on an Ironman profile isn't always the same as somebody who plays on a regular profile. When you start an Ironman profile, if you do progress on it, you know you have to commit to a much longer grind. You can't cut corners with any sort of progression. It's got to all kind of be done by hand. And I think the bottom line is, those Ironman players know that they're in for a long grind, and those Ironman players are probably willing to put in more time and more grinding than those players who aren't on Ironman. Which means that not only do those drops feel so much sweeter when they do drop, you know, and that results in people wanting to show them off more, which is completely understandable, but also the reality is they've probably put more time into whatever they're grinding than other people have. Meaning that they're bound to drop more items, right? This isn't exact science, this is just generalization, but I think for the most part it's true. And to be honest, if it did come out that Ironman had slightly better RNG than everybody else, and it was true, you know, this myth, this conspiracy, then I don't think most people would have massive complaints, considering it's straight up more difficult to get those drops because you can't buy them, you've got to grind for them yourself anyway. Now, in my opinion, and the way that I see it, I think most people can reasonably accept that this conspiracy or myth is pretty much debunked. You know, in the mechanics of the game, Ironman players don't have better RNG, but just because of the way that maybe it's, you know, they publicize their RNG drops, or they talk about them more, or they play more of the game, and so on, because those drops are so much sweeter, it seems like their RNG is better. It seems like they're dropping more better items than people who aren't on Ironman, which probably isn't the case. But when there's a will, there's a way. People will always speculate, and until we see those game files, I think people will still speculate. Now, you can let me know what you think in the comments. But it would be kind of crazy if after all of this time, Ironman players did have a hidden RNG buff that nobody knew about. It would be hilarious. Moving on. Magic Find and Pet Luck are not real, they don't work, and they're just a placebo effect. Before we get into this at all, before we talk about it, I just want to say, if you start a new profile, and it's the first time that you go to the end, and you just simply go around killing these Endermen, you will drop barely anything. But as soon as you throw a God Pot on, you will notice a massive, massive difference. A huge difference. A God Potion gives you plus 75 Magic Find, which will regularly take your Magic Find from 10, 20 to closer to 100. You will notice a massive, massive, massive difference. You'll be dropping way, way, way more pieces of armor, pieces of equipment, you name it. So I think the idea that Magic Find doesn't work at all is just simply completely and utterly wrong and has no argument. It has no room for an argument at all, because that is just pure proof. But I think what the real argument is for Magic Find, and maybe also for Pet Luck, is that maybe it scales differently when you have more Magic Find. When you gain a little bit of extra Magic Find, does that provide the same buff as it did at the start? Does Magic Find affect your chances to drop harder to drop items the same way as it does easier to drop items? Now, I think that's more of a reasonable conversation to have. Once again, back to our favourite website. And the question posed here is, what's one of Skyblock's conspiracy theory that you believe in? Magic Find is a placebo. Pet Luck, more placebo. Pet Luck just straight up doesn't do anything. Magic Find does not work, and it's just a ghost stat. Magic Find. That Magic Find doesn't work. Magic Find is a bloody placebo. Magic Find is a myth. Magic Find is fake. I could go on and on. Do you see where I'm coming from? The sheer proportion of people alone commenting that Magic Find or Pet Luck, it just simply isn't real and doesn't do anything compared to anything else, kind of shows you just how many people have, you know, little faith in Magic Find. Now, for those of you who might not know exactly what Magic Find is or does, Magic Find increases how many rare items you can find. It simply increases your chances to drop items. There's many different ways you can increase your Magic Find, there's many different sources of Magic Find, and when it comes to hypermaxing Magic Find, it becomes incredibly, incredibly, incredibly expensive. We'll come back to Pet Luck in just a little bit, but why do so many people think that Magic Find simply doesn't work or doesn't do anything? Well, Magic Find is an interesting stat, different to pretty much everything else, bar Pet Luck. And here's why. It's not a stat that you can physically see working. Now, if I go over to Maxwell, and I have the Hurtful Power Stone on, okay, just for the sake of ease. My stats are completely irrelevant, but we can see that I have just over 1,000 strength and just over 1,100 crit damage. Which means that if I hit a mob, well, my game's really, really bugging out, so I can't even see how much damage I'm dealing, which is really quite annoying because I wanted to see how much damage I was dealing. I wanted to display that, you know, changes in damage stats, as an example, are physical. You can physically see them working. If you have less crit damage and less strength, you'll do less damage. If you have more crit damage and more strength, you'll deal more damage. You can see these stats working. But hypothetically, you could do 500 E-Man bosses with 0 Magic Find, and 500 E-Man bosses with the cap 900 Magic Find, and neither times you might not drop anything. At the same time, you might drop the same amount of items, and at the same time, you might drop more items with less Magic Find than you do with more. And I think ultimately we've got to be reasonable. When most people say Magic Find doesn't work, it's probably because they've been grinding a Slayer for a very long time and they've not dropped the big drop that they want. The chances to drop a Warden Heart is 0.01%. Incredibly, you know, hard to drop. A Primordial Eye has a very, very similar drop chance. An Overflux, still incredibly rare. And the same goes for a Judgment Core, all incredibly rare drops. When you already have an incredibly rare drop, and you're increasing its chances to drop by a fraction, then in reality that increase is actually very, very small. That's why we see Magic Find working much more visibly on lower end mobs, where these items that drop from these mobs aren't really that rare, just as I mentioned before with the drops from the Enderman in the end. Also, I mentioned before that increasing your Magic Find and hypermaxing costs an incredible amount of coins. And in reality, it's for a very, very, very small buff. If you add the fact in that you might even feel like you've been ripped off, it kind of just adds to the feeling that Magic Find isn't doing anything. Now, ultimately, is the Magic Find stat real? Yeah, because you can physically see it working. Even when you're looking at rarer drops with really, really high Magic Find players, compare that to somebody who doesn't have as high Magic Find as them, there's still a sizable difference over, you know, a long enough test period. But you've got to also account that it is still RNG. So ultimately, if you're just having a bad day and you're having bad luck and you're having bad RNG, then it could absolutely seem like Magic Find isn't real. But let's be honest, it is real. It just doesn't seem that way sometimes. Now, pet luck works in a similar way, but at the same time, it is different. To make it clear, pet luck increases how many pets you find and gives you better luck when crafting pets. Now, once again, I have literal in-person visible proof for me that pet luck is a thing. A good few months back, even maybe close to a year back, I did a gambling video on Hypixel Skyblock, and I gave half of my money to my friend and I had half the money, and I didn't realise that my pet luck was so low. We both crafted pets and he got way more legendaries than I did. And then I realised it's because I have lower pet luck. And we did it a few times, and it just is real. When you're crafting pets, it is a thing. As long as, you know, the comparable difference is sizable. But I think the actual presence of pet luck becomes a lot less detectable when it comes down to dropping pets. Because let's be completely honest, if you're maxing your pet luck, it's because that you're trying to drop a pet that's difficult to drop. For example, something like an Ender Dragon. And once again, it's the same situation as with, you know, hard to drop items where you're thinking Magic Find doesn't work. If the item is already improbable to drop, pet luck is going to increase your chances, but it's not going to make a massive difference. You know, even with the increased chance, doesn't mean it becomes, you know, common. It's still incredibly rare to drop with the increased chance from pet luck. Now, the Magic Find wiki explains how Magic Find and also pet luck is calculated. Now, whether this is accurate or it actually happens differently is obviously unknown. Because at the end of the day, Magic Find and pet luck is still contributing towards something that is RNG based. And you've got to consider that the wiki isn't always correct. We've had it before where the Devan's Alloy wiki was basically incorrect, giving incorrect information on its drop chances. But ultimately, because Magic Find and pet luck affect things that are RNG based, it's really difficult to tangibly say that pet luck or Magic Find makes a big difference, or even exists, and I can understand the people thinking it doesn't. But in my opinion, it just it just probably is real. It's just easier to think that. But my opinion doesn't mean it's the correct opinion. Everyone's entitled to their opinion. So let me know what you think of these conspiracy theories in the comments. That being said, if you enjoyed today's video, make sure to leave a like, subscribe if you're new, and I'll see you in the next one.